Chapter 21 Unfathomable. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Ah, I feel quite refreshed. Shaking her head and bringing up a gust of wind around herself, Evelyn cleaned off the blood from the tiger she had just finished eating. Her appetite had been quite high after her evolution and testing out her new magical abilities. Now that she had eaten though, she felt revitalized and ready to continue on her journey to exit these woods that were full of harsh memories. Unfortunately the core of this tiger really did not fill me up like they usually do. Making this discovery, Evelyn figured it probably had something to do with her recent transformation that had made her much stronger. The cores of lower-ranking beasts just were not really going to do it for her now that she was at the realm above them. At least the meat was still filling, though it is hard to believe how accustomed I have gotten to hunting down and eating prey raw. Looking at the skeleton of the tiger that she had practically picked clean, she knew that had she seen this when she was a human, it would have made her queasy and likely not able to eat for at least a day. Yet now it did not stir up any emotions of disgust, and instead she got a sense of satisfaction for taking down what was a top predator. After taking one last look at the tiger she had defeated, Evelyn took back to the air and continued flying away from the lab where she had been held captive and her parents had been killed. Might as well see how long I can go. Activating the power of the Ethersphere, which was the name of the divine item that had fused with her, she lowered the gravity around her to about 70% of its normal force. This allowed her to fly much easier, and along with it she unleashed the occasional gust of wind to accelerate herself. Unfortunately, she was only able to keep this up for around 15 minutes, as even though she was not exerting her gravity powers to their max, it still took a huge toll on her magical energy to use. Guess I cannot use it to speed up my flying for an extended period of time. I'll just have to save it for short bursts in case of emergency. Coming to understand that even with her recent increase in power she could not use her magic continuously, Evelyn stopped using her powers to accelerate and flew normally. Still, she was quite a bit faster now than how she had been before, and with her increased strength she flew with even more confidence. She felt that now that she could take down a tiger there was no reason to worry about trying to hide herself, since she had been able to take down the strongest beast she had seen since her escape. Oh, what is this? Suddenly, as she was flying along and had made it around 40 miles from where she had killed the tiger, she felt a tugging in her chest from the Ethersphere. It had abruptly stated pointing in a certain direction like a compass, trying to guide Evelyn somewhere. I wonder what this is. The only abilities that I thought I had access to were to increase or lessen gravity. Everything else that it can do, whatever that may be, as it told me was damaged and inoperable. Nevertheless, even though Evelyn had no idea what sort of function was at work, she decided to follow the direction the item bound to her was pointing. As much as at an emotional level she loathed it for killing her parents, she knew logically that it was her greatest assets in the world. Therefore, if it was pointing her somewhere, she decided to trust it this time to figure out where it wanted to lead her. Flying in the direction she was being led, Evelyn noticed that the forest once again took on a less vibrant and lush appearance. L.rg. In fact, as she continued, the trees got smaller and other plants became sparser. At first, she thought maybe she was heading towards a desert, but the air did not seem to be getting any drier and she did not see any signs of sand. However, the cause of the malnourished foliage soon became apparent, as she spotted a huge stem of some sort of plant in the distance. What the hell is that thing? Seeing this huge plant that was bigger than any tree she had ever seen or heard about, Evelyn was stunned in awe. It was so tall that she could not even see the top of it that was currently covered in clouds, and all she could see was the vibrant green stem and the few dozen massive leaves the plant had. Is that where I am being led to? Thinking about it, Evelyn could only conclude that her speculation was correct, as the Ethersphere was definitely pointing in the direction of this plant. She even tried veering away from it a few miles, but there was no doubt that this was where she was being led. Yet as she got closer, and the landscape became even less vibrant, she realized something else. The reason that magical energy seemed so sparse in this region was because of that massive plant. It was draining all of the magical energy towards itself and leaving nothing for anything else. The tree that I got from the plum was also absorbing magical energy, but not like this. What sort of power must that thing have in order to need this much energy? Not able to fathom the degree to which this plant must need magical energy, Evelyn could only speculate on what it might be able to do. The small plum she had eaten, while seeming to have had a massive amount of magical energy in it, did not even register on the same scale as the plant she was headed for. Getting closer and closer, Evelyn felt anticipation as to what kind of treasure she might get from this plant and wondered if it might give her a massive power boost. The small plum had caused her to evolve, so whatever this had to offer should be worth thousands of times more magical energy. Oh, the clouds are breaking. Whoa! Being able to see the full majesty of the plant that was draining magical energy from the surroundings for hundreds of miles. Evelyn was astonished by its beauty. Rising high into the sky was a vibrant red flower, that was honestly more beautiful than anything she had ever seen. I have to have it, Evelyn thought as she gazed upon it. Her instincts told her to claim it just as they had the silver plum, but to an even more intense degree. It was as if her body knew that she would become unfathomably stronger if she could get a hold of this flower. Except as she got closer, she saw why this flower was not being swarmed by other beasts. Honestly, as she saw it, she realized how stupid of it was for her to approach this obviously immensely powerful flower. Just like the silver plum had a beast that laid claim to it, this flower was already being protected by a beast that had an interest in it. However, what was protecting this flower was something so beyond Evelyn that just looking at it from afar sent chills down her body. Coiled around the flower was a vibrant green snake the size of a cargo train. It blended in quite well with the flower's stem, but now that she was within a few miles she had spotted this incomprehensibly strong beast. Even from this far away, the instinctual terror she felt was enough to make her want to fly away as fast as possible. She could tell that with a simple thought this creature could end her life, and there would be nothing she could do. Fortunately, this colossal snake had no interest in Evelyn. Certainly, it had long since noticed her approach. But if it went out of its way to crush every ant that approached its turf, it would waste far too much time and energy. When instead it could just continue to nap and wait for its prize to finish growing. Turning around abruptly, she no longer cared that her divine item was beckoning her to that plant. She flew away as fast as she could. That beast was so far beyond her that she wanted to get as far away as possible. Damn it, this thing is trying to get me killed. If it thinks I am going after that flower, it has more than a screw loose. Flying for nearly 2 hours, Evelyn finally felt safe when she could no longer see the snake that had wrapped itself around the flower. Quickly she looked for a place to rest, since she was exhausted both physically and mentally from that encounter. Finding a hollow in a tree she floated down to it, where she located a long-abandoned nest. Once inside this nest she allowed herself to relax, and soon sleep found her exhausted body that needed to recuperate. Chapter 22 Pursuers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Waking up after her exhausting previous day, Evelyn let out a long yawn. Shaking her body off and creating a gust of wind around her, she blew off all of the dust that had settled on her body while she slept. Okay, time to get out of here. I need to get away from that massive flower and the snake protecting it. As well as increase the distance between me and that infernal lab. Hopping out of the abandoned nest she had spent the night in, Evelyn spread her wings out and flapped them around a few times before leaping back into the air. She did not know how far she needed to travel to escape these woods, but she had every intention of heading in one direction until she made it somewhere else. However, unknown to her was that as she left her temporary shelter, a pair of people who were out specifically looking for owls spotted her. It was truly bad luck that she had got their gaze, but for these two people it could be considered quite fortunate. What is that sound? Suddenly hearing what sounded like a sharp whistling sound, Evelyn turned her head around in time to see a harpoon coming right for her. Spinning around and taking evasive action, she just barely dodged being impaled on the sharp and sleek metal rod. Looking towards the source of this attack, she saw two humans, a male and a female, running after her. Except unlike what the people who had captured and confined her before were wearing. These humans were wearing a white military uniform. Those must be some of the people that attacked the facility. I suppose that means that they were after the other sphere that was put inside me. Seeing as how she was being pursued by unknown assailants, Evelyn could only conclude that they wanted her divine item. Turning her head back around, she picked up her pace and lowered the gravity around herself. While last time she had not been fast enough to escape the humans that hunted her, this time she hoped things might be different. Yet as she began gaining on the humans that were after her, one of them began casting a spell. Accelerate. After the female human that was chasing Evelyn cast his spell, a soft white glow surrounded her and her partner. The two of them sped up dramatically with this spell, and Evelyn soon had them hot on her heels again. Damn it, they are persistent. Evelyn thought as she banked to the left to avoid the harpoon being thrown at her again. With fleeing not seeming to be an option, Evelyn began racking her brains on what to do. She did not even consider the notion of fighting them, as she had seen her parents lose spectacularly to a single human in the past. Of course, these two were actually not as strong as the man who beat her parents, but she had no way to know that. The fear and trauma she had of humans made her see them as major threats to be avoided at all costs and to go after only if they were already on the verge of death. Why could they not just leave me alone? Continuing to dodge attacks from these two, Evelyn was beginning to feel the pressure. The man had now started using magic as well, and every time he completed his spell, a shard of glass shot right for her. At this rate I am going to run out of magical energy and will get caught. Having to use gusts of wind while also lowering her own gravity to keep ahead of these humans, Evelyn was burning through the magical energy she had. Eventually she was going to run out and that would be the end for her. But as she continued dodging the humans' attacks much to their annoyance, she came up with a plan. It was incredibly risky, and she figured that it had a high chance of getting her killed. But she would rather die a quick death while trying to survive than to be captured again. Abruptly turning, she started going in a different direction than where she had been fleeing to before. There was a certain location she was aiming for now, and if she could make it there, she might just have a chance of ditching these two persistent humans. Increasing the output of her wind bursts and lowering her gravity, Evelyn boosted her speed again. She knew she could not keep this up for long, but she wanted to cover as much distance as possible quickly to avoid being hit by any attacks. Luckily her increased speed also forced her pursuers to speed up, and now they were spending most of their energy chasing after her and could only send out the occasional attack that had no chance of hitting. Weaving in and out of the trees, Evelyn moved quickly and purposefully towards her destination, which the humans had failed to notice because of how intent they were on catching her while they were not certain that she was the one with the object they had been told to retrieve. This was the first owl they had come across that had managed to continue to avoid them for this long. Also, she seemed to have some sort of strange power and was manipulating magic quite well for a recently ascended fiend beast. There it is. Hopefully it does not kill me. Flying out of the woods and into a large clearing, Evelyn was now out in the open in the area around the massive red flower that reached high into the sky. Though that was not the reason she had come back here, but instead for the beast that was protecting it. She was hoping that the humans would turn tail and run the second they saw the snake the size of a freight train. I am just a speck of dust. I am just a speck dust. Evelyn thought as the serpent's eyes bored into her. Naturally it had sensed the entities that were moving towards its location and turned its head toward them when Evelyn appeared in its clearing. But when it saw what was chasing after her and recognized that they were humans, TT's eyes narrowed and it let out a murderous aura. It had dealt with humans in the past, and it hated them immediately. It understood what the owl that was flying by was trying to do. As soon as the humans chasing after Evelyn entered the clearing, they realized where they were. They had been too intent on chasing Evelyn and had realized too late where they were being led. Freezing in fear, they stared in horror at the ruler of the Deadlands and the beast that had claimed the treasure that had drained the majority of the mana out of this area. No longer were their minds on the owl they had been pursuing, and all that consumed them was an all-encompassing fear that ordered them to run away. Yet before they could even take one step, the colossal serpent swung its tail so fast that it was unperceivable, and a loud shockwave resounded throughout the area as it broke past the sound barrier many times over. In an instant the two humans that had been chasing Evelyn were turned to mist and dust as the serpent's tail connected with them. It was an overwhelming display of power, as with one simple lash of its tail it had obliterated the two humans that had been after Evelyn. Following its attack, she watched the forest shake, and the area around where the serpent's tail had impacted had left a huge scar in the ground. Gulping, Evelyn felt the serpent's gaze turn back towards her, and she thought that any moment now she would be on the receiving end of its tail. But after just giving her a menacing glance, it lowered its head back down and nodded back off to sleep. It was going to give Evelyn a freebie this time since it understood what it was like to be chased by humans. However, if she tried the same stunt again, it would not be so friendly. Chapter 23 The Harshness of the World of Beasts. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Her heart beating wildly, Evelyn could not believe that she had survived. By some miracle the giant serpent had decided to let her go and killed the humans that had been after her. Truthfully, she thought that this was going to be the end of her, but she already knew that there were things worse than a swift death, so she had taken her chances. However, she came out alive either due to the serpent's charity, or more likely indifference. Soon she had flown out the other side of the clearing where the colossal beast called its home and kept going at full speed. She was still alive, and for now her goal was to get the hell away from this place. So, she flew and flew until her wings could carry her no more. When she was too exhausted to continue, she found a safe place to rest and slept. Then once she was rested, she would get up and fly some more, only stopping to eat and rest. This went on for days until the scenery around her began to change. The forest she had always been in began to thin and turn into a sprawling grassland that spread out for miles and was dotted only by the occasional tree. Along with this change in scenery, Evelyn could tell that the magical energy in the area was now much thicker than it had been before. The range of the massive flower that was sucking all of the surrounding energy to itself had begun to wane. Just breathing in the air here Evelyn felt like she was absorbing the ambient magical energy. Ah, it is good to finally be out of those woods, she thought, feeling a sense of relief now that she had escaped the domain that held mostly bad memories for her. For the first time since she had been captured, she felt that the world was wide open to her and that the possibilities were endless. Though be that as they were, she still had not much of a clue as to what she should do next. Her knowledge of this world was sorely lacking, and as an owl she knew that she could not just try and enter a human settlement to learn even if she knew where one was. Not to mention she had no clue about the long of this world to start with. Then there was also the magic that permeated this world. Other than the fact that she could create gusts of wind and control gravity a bit, she did not know how or why it worked. She had seen her parents use their magic more fluidly than she could, but what was really an enigma was the magic that the humans had used. Their spells were more precise in what they did as far as she could see, but they also needed to be cast with hand gestures and words. I suppose all I can do for now is continue to get stronger and survive. As long as I keep going, I should figure more out as I go. For now, I should try and find a place to use as a base while I explore this area. With no clear direction before her, Evelyn decided to just see what this new place she had come to had to offer. Flying around she decided to check on a tree that she had spotted on top of a hill not too far away from her current location and see if it might make a suitable base. However, when she arrived, she found that this tree already had a number of occupants. A group of what looked like a fusion between a possum and a wolverine were crowded in this tree. As soon as they saw Evelyn they began growling and snarling at her. Obviously having a temperament closer to a wolverine than a possum. Whoa! Dodging out of the way, she just barely avoided being hit by a shot of spit from one of the two biggest of these beasts that were obviously the leaders. When the spit hit the ground below her, Evelyn heard a sizzling sound and saw that the grass had begun burning. Fine, I will find somewhere else. Not wanting to get into a conflict with so many beasts, Evelyn flew back up into the air and headed on her way. She was not looking for a fight, and simply wanted a place to rest after traveling for so long. Yet as she checked the next tree, she found it overrun with another group of these creatures. Seeing this, she thought about heading back to the forest that always had a place for her to rest, but she could not bring herself to go back there. I will find a place soon enough, I just need to be patient. Continuing her search, Evelyn soared higher into the air to get a better look at her surroundings. Except this turned out to be a dangerous idea, as a number of winged lizards that had been basking on a rock that still retained the heat of the day saw her. Taking to the skies, these winged lizards that were around 4 feet long, began flying towards Evelyn, who had invaded their territory. Spotting these beasts that were coming for her from below, Evelyn began to panic. There were about 12 of these lizards, and she was already exhausted. I am way too tired for this. Sick of running away, she went into a nosedive right towards these winged lizards and picked up speed rapidly as she increased her own gravity. Creating a gust of wind around herself, she crashed into around 1/3 of the winged lizards like a cannonball. Then without missing a beat, she spun around and raked her claws through one of their bodies and cleaved it into pieces. Though after her opening attack, the lizards began their own, and opened their mouths. Immediately Evelyn felt a sharp pain in her head as the lizards unleash a sonic screech at her. With her impeccable hearing, the sonic attacks hurt even more than they would have for less sound-sensitive creatures. Knock it off. Flailing around, Evelyn sent out as large a gust of wind as she could to blow the lizards away. With them now knocked off balance, she flew around as swiftly as she could while lowering the gravity around her and using wind bursts as propulsion. Quickly she began slicing up these lizards, that while the same rank as her were all quite a bit weaker. However, what they lacked in personal power they made up for with their large group, and soon they began swarming Evelyn. Feeling claws rip into her, and teeth being sunk in, Evelyn began thrashing around to knock the lizards off. But they would not release her no matter what she did. Their claws and teeth were locked into her and would not come undone. Okay, you want to poly it this way? Then let me see who is tougher. Feeling her anger and panic rising, Evelyn switched her strategy and created an area of increased gravity around her. With the gravity suddenly becoming 3 times greater, Evelyn along with the winged lizards began dropping out of the air. Bang! Crashing into the ground, they left a small crater, and the lizards that had been under Evelyn lay broken and dead. The others were now shaken from the impact and had been thrown from Evelyn's body. Jumping up, she got to work on dispatching the remaining lizards by jamming her talons into them. She had prepared herself for the impact, since she was the one who caused it, and had managed to take less damage by creating a wind cushion and lowering the gravity around only her at the last moment. Soon all of the lizards that had tired to kill her lay dead around her. Breathing heavily, she looked around at the carnage of her latest battle and realized how stupid she had been. This world was dangerous, and flying out in the open like that just made her an easy target. Great, in the woods it is the humans who are after me, and here it is the other beasts. Is there nowhere that I can be safe? Lamenting her situation, Evelyn limped over to the nearest lizard and began eating. She had used up all of her strength fighting them off and needed food to recover. Once she had finished eating, she felt a bit of her strength had returned to her and turned her head towards the moon that was rising into the sky. She did not know which direction it rose in, since this was not Earth, but she decided to follow it. Right now what she needed was direction, and the place where the moon rose was as good as any, since it would lead her away from the places she wanted to escape from. I will live. I already died once, but this time I am going to live out a full life. Chapter 24 The Ruins. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Exhausted and beaten half to death, Evelyn was beginning to understand how harsh the world outside the forest was. The power and number of the surrounding beasts had gone up drastically, and it seemed that they all wanted to kill her. Nevertheless, at least they were not trying to throw her in a cage and run experiments on her, so she considered it better than when she had been captured by the humans. Still, the night was already beginning to get late, and she was no closer to finding a place to rest. All of the trees she had visited were inhabited by some type of acid-spitting wolverine, possum combo, and when she tired flying high for a better vantage point she was immediately attacked. Some owls live in burrows, right? I guess for the first time I may need to spend the night on the ground. Dragging her injured body away from the site of her final confrontation with the winged lizards, she headed for a rock she had spotted in the distance. Luckily when she found it there was no other occupants around, and using what little strength she had left, she began digging out the ground. 40 minutes later she had created a small burrow she could barely fit in, but was too exhausted to do any more. Then activating her gravity magic she lowered the surrounding area's gravity as much as she could and moved the rock she had borrowed under slightly so that it closed off the hole. The second she was secured, she fell right over and went to sleep, even though at this time she would normally still be out and about. Right now her schedule was all over the place, and while normally she might be active from early evening to early morning, currently she simply could not stay awake. Unfortunately, while she did sleep it was not soundly, as she had terrible nightmares all night, as some of her worst memories played out in her dreams again. No. Waking up with a start, Evelyn was reaching her wing out as if trying to grab a hold of someone. Immediately she remembered the last dream she had been having, and a cold shiver went down her entire body and tears trickled down her eyes. She had just had to relive watching her brother die back on Earth. Damn it. Why does all of this have to happen to me? Evelyn thought as she wiped the tears out of her eyes. Her situation right now sort of reminded her of when she and Mason had been on the run after she killed their father. Only this time she was alone and with significantly more trauma than even then. Still, she was resolved to survive for now, and hopefully there might be some amount of happiness waiting for her in this world. Raising her body up, she felt sore from the battle she had yesterday and the cramped quarters she had slept in. But she knew she could not just stay here and waste away. So, she gathered her strength and once again moved the rock she used to block off her temporary burrow. Today was the day she was resolved to find a place to call her own for at least a little while, in order to really get her bearings. Exiting the burrow, she headed back over to where she had her battle the day before and found that the corpses of the winged lizards she had left were gone. It looked like some type of scavenger had come by and taken them in the night, and she was now especially grateful she had not given in to her desire to just collapse on the ground here. Having satisfied her curiosity, she took back into the air and continued flying in the direction that the moon rises. Naturally she had now learned not to fly too high after yesterday's experience, and only kept herself around 15 feet away from the ground. She did not want to attract unnecessary attention again in this open grassland. With her luck, next time something spotted her it would be a massive beast she had no chance of escaping from. What is that? After flying for hours over the grassland, Evelyn spotted something in the distance that stood up from the ground. However, she could tell that it was not trees since they only sparsely dotted this biome, and it was too isolated to be another forest. Yet as she got closer, she recognized what it was that she was seeing. It is a town. Understanding that this was a human settlement, Evelyn turned in another direction to give it a wide berth, wanting nothing to do with people. She had mostly bad experiences with the worst of humanity in both of her lives, and she had no intention of having anything to do with people ever again if she could help it. Continuing to fly along, she soon passed over the remains of a long disused road. Seeing this, Evelyn wondered why it was so overgrown, when she realized what this likely meant. That town is probably no longer inhabited. Evelyn though, as she turned her gaze back towards it. Right now she was looking for a good place to stay, and while every good area she had found so far was occupied, an abandoned settlement might just be what she needed. She figured that it was less likely that other beasts would make their homes there, and as a former human she might find something useful. Maybe I can even get lucky and find some picture books with labels in them and try to figure out the long. She thought, hoping for some good fortune. Turning towards the town, she began flying for it, hoping that it might just be a good base for herself. Hours quickly went by as she approached the area, and her anticipation grew greater and greater as she got closer. The road had become even worse and more damaged as she advanced, and now she could see the outline of a wall that had cracks through it. Soon she was close enough to see into what used to be a small town, and there was no doubt no one lived there anymore. The clay buildings inside the wall were beginning to crumble, and there was overgrown grass all over what used to be walkways. Flying over the place, Evelyn did a thorough scan from the air, but as far as she could tell not a single person lived here anymore, and only a few small beasts had entered the place. Yes, I think this place will do nicely. Evelyn thought as she swooped down and grabbed some sort of rodent that had been crawling through the grass. This place had an abundance of easy food and would be able to provide shelter from the elements. Not to mention that while the wall was falling apart, it had no large gaps in it that bigger beasts that might be a threat could get through. Once she had finished eating her quick snack, Evelyn lifted off and began searching the buildings, looking for anything useful that might have been left behind. Chapter 25 Exploring the Ruins. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Having discovered the ruins of a long-gone human civilization, Evelyn decided to make it her new base. It was, as far as she could tell, the perfect place for her to be right now. Not only was it an enclosed and protected area, but there was the possibility that it might hold some valuable information or items within it. Certainly, Evelyn figured most beasts would find anything humans had made to be useless. But to her, as a former human, she was certain she could use what she might find to her advantage. Come on, let there be something good in here, Evelyn thought as she flew into the first house. Quickly she began searching the area, but it was pretty bare. There were signs of things like a kitchen, but anything useful was either gone or degraded. This is all that is left. Finding a single large clay pot that was at one time filled with something organic, but now all that was left was the dried out bits of dying mold, her disappointment was immeasurable. The pot also had cracks in it and would not hold much of anything anymore, making it completely useless. Well, this house is a bust. On to the next one. Searching the next building, Evelyn once again came up with squat. Though this pretty much confirmed to her that this place was simply abandoned rather than some sort of accident or mass killing. In those situations, she would expect to find more signs of things being left, not to mention human remains. With the arid environment here, it would be likely that there would still be at least some pieces of skeletons should the people have met their end here. Ugh, this is both good and bad. Good because if it was abandoned, it appears to have been for quite some time and I doubt anyone is going to come back. Bad because that means they probably took all of their good stuff with them. Sighing, Evelyn had really been hoping to find something that would give her a better insight to the people of this world, but that seemed unlikely now. Not to mention that this place was so long abandoned that the treated wood in the houses had all but rotted away. Still, Evelyn decided to check out all of the buildings since it was possible something useful might have been left behind by those that used to live here left. Though it also served two other purposes. This way she could scope out the best place for her to set up her temporary home and make absolute sure that nothing dangerous was skulking around. Slowly but surely, she made her way through all of the buildings. Starting with those on the outskirts and making her way towards the ones in the middle that were larger and more likely to hold something valuable. Unfortunately, as she searched, she found very little that would be useful. All that she came across in the entirety of her search were a few glass bottles that had managed to not break, and a single wood-burning stove that seemed in good enough condition to be used. This is the last place. All my hopes ride on this building. I saved the best for last, but after everything else, I am not holding my breath. Entering inside the largest and most central building, Evelyn found that it was not any different from the rest of the buildings. It was pretty much picked clean with only large items being left behind. Unfortunately, most things had degraded over what must have been a long period of time. Though when she made it to a certain room, she was surprised to see that it seemed to be in decent condition. Whoa, a bathtub. That is the first time I have seen one of those in any of these buildings. Jumping up into the tub, Evelyn began looking around and found why this room still seemed to be intact more so than any other. There was some sort of circle with runes carved into it on the floor of the bathtub, and it appeared that this place had been enchanted somehow. I wonder. Placing one of her wings over the circle, she began trying to send out her magical energy. And to her surprise it worked. From out of the circle her magical energy began being converted into water, and the tub started filling up. Sadly, the drain plug was long gone, so the water just went out to wherever it was going, but Evelyn was still ecstatic. She was covered in blood, dirt, and dust, and this was the perfect opportunity for her to get clean. Splashing around in the water, she began having herself a little bird bath and watched as all the grim that had built up on her began to wash away. Ah, it feels so good to be clean again. I have not washed myself off since those bastards captured me. Playing around in the water, Evelyn enjoyed her time in the magical bath. Though after around an hour her magical energy began to be depleted and she had to stop. This has definitely been worth it. Just this magical water creating circle was worth the entire trip here as far as I am concerned. Very happy with her newfound discovery, Evelyn thought that maybe her luck was looking up. I still have the rest of the place to search now. Maybe I can find something else like this. Yet as Evelyn made her way to leave, she thought about something else she wanted to do. Quickly she used what remained of her magical energy to fill up the tub a bit and sat on the drain to slow down the loss of water. Then she looked down at the water and at her own reflection. She had not seen what she looks like in this life, and now was the perfect chance. I look similar to my parents, but I have a different feather pattern. Looking at herself in the water's reflection, Evelyn saw that she resembled a great horned owl, but she had colored feathers on her body just like her parents. Like both her mother and father, she had spots of green, but along with those she had purple feathers, which she found strange. Once all the water had drained again and she had gotten her fill of looking at her reflection, Evelyn shook the lingering water off of her body, and began searching the remainder of the final building. Oh, what do we have here? Finding something of interest, she pulled away into an odd room that unlike the rest was tiled. Certainly, it normally would not have caught her or anyone's eye, but one area of the tiles seemed to be loose. Flying down towards this area, she removed the tiles and found a pair of metal doors that led down into a cellar. Come on, you can open. Do not let the rust stop you now. Pulling up with all her strength, Evelyn tried to pry open the metal doors that had rusted shut. Then with one big yank, she wrenched them open, and a cloud of dust spread out over the room. With one swish of her wings, she blew the dust away and looked down into the dark cellar. Luckily, as an owl, her night vision was impeccable, and she could see all the way down to the bottom of the dirt floor. Of course, the stairs had long since deteriorated, but that meant nothing to her as she glided down into the cellar. Score. Looking through the cellar, Evelyn saw that a number of glass containers were still intact, and their contents still inside. Going up to one, she pulled the sealed top off and an amber liquid began spilling out. Immediately the smell of alcohol hit Evelyn's nose and she figured out exactly what it was that had been stored here. Feeling a sense of anger rising up inside of her, Evelyn had a burning hate for alcohol. Her human father had become an alcoholic after her mother's death and it had destroyed her life. In a rage she quickly went around breaking all of the bottles, not caring that they might be useful. She wanted nothing to do with any alcohol ever, and wanted it gone. Soon she stood in front of the last bottle, and with one swipe of her claws shattered it, letting the long-lasting liquor that had survived all these years spill out onto the floor of the cellar. Yet as she looked down at the last of the alcohol spilling out, she felt a tug in her chest as the ethersphere pointed her downwards. Chapter 2626, Spoiler, title at the bottom, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Feeling the familiar tugging sensation in her chest from the ethersphere, Evelyn was completely caught off guard. Last time she felt this, it led her to a colossal flower that was being guarded by a serpent the size of a freight train. During that time, she had thought she was going to die because she followed its directions, and only survived due to the serpent's indifference. Of course, the serpent had later saved her from the human pursers, but things could have just as easily ended up with her dying. Yet this time it was quite obvious that it was not pointing the direction of that flower. She had put a good amount of distance between it and herself, and this time the other sphere was pointing down. What the hell is going on? Why did it suddenly start doing this again? For a moment she thought maybe the thing was so badly damaged that it might just be sending out some sort of false signal. But as she backed off from the spot she was standing on, it disappeared, and when she walked back, it came back. In only this one spot right in front of the last bottle of alcohol was she within range of the other sphere's detection ability. Though she had no idea exactly what it was detecting, or what met the criteria to be picked up by it. Last time it led me to that flower, which I am pretty sure had some powerful magical properties. My instincts told me to do whatever I could to claim it, so there is no doubt it was very valuable. Maybe this thing can point me towards things that have a lot of magic. Still, if I follow it this time, I could end up dead. Thinking about what to do, Evelyn was truly at a loss. Certainly, she could speculate that she was being pointed in the direction of something that might make her stronger and help her survive in this harsh world. But it could just as easily lead her to her death. Still, unlike last time where the flower was above the ground, this time she was being pointed downward. That meant maybe there was some abandoned ruin similar to the one up here, except this one might be full of treasure. But how the hell would I begin making my way down if I wanted to look for it? Curiosity and desire welling up inside her, Evelyn started thinking more and more about how to get to whatever item the other sphere might be leading her to. Any advantage she could get in this world that she knew little about was welcome, and it was hard to fight the temptation. Nothing ventured, nothing gained, as they say. I have been racked with so much bad luck that something has to go my way eventually, right? Making up her mind, Evelyn decided to try and find whatever it was she was being led to. Unfortunately, it was not like she could just burrow underground to it, so she went around the cellar looking for some sort of access that would lead further down. Nevertheless, nothing obvious presented itself like a lever or hidden button, and she quickly resorted to digging around. First, she tired right under the place where she was getting the signal, but after around 2 feet of digging through the dirt she gave up there. She then went to the center of the room and tired there, but nothing came about it. Trying random spots for around the next 2 hours she had no luck, and all she got for it was to make herself dirty again. I should have known it would not be that easy. Whatever it is has probably been buried even longer than this place has existed. I might have to dig 1,000 feet or more before I come across a path that leads down. Giving up on what she figured was a fool's errand, Evelyn made her way over to the exit of the cellar, when she noticed something with her keen eyes. One of the areas where she had shattered a glass container full of alcohol was already dry, unlike all of the others. Normally it would have seemed an inconspicuous spot, pretty far from the place where she was getting the other sphere's direction. Heading over to this area, she began digging, and after around 11 inches in the dirt gave way to another hatch. However, unlike everything else she had found in this ruin, this hatch still seemed in pristine condition and to be made of far high-quality materials. Did the people who built here originally put their town right over some sort of ancient ruin or something, and not even know about it? But this hatch honestly looks newer than everything else here, though that could just be because of its higher quality. Wondering about this hatch, Evelyn really could not understand why it was here. She thought maybe it was some place that the original owner of this building stored stuff he did not want anyone else to find. Or maybe someone else found this place in ruins and decided to hide their treasures here and put this hatch in at a later time. Now the question is if I can even open it. Reaching her claw down towards the hatch, she pulled up on it, and to her surprise it opened with ease. Looking down, she saw a ladder that descended for a long way down and was lit up by what looked to be slightly glowing stones. The light was so dim that a human probably would have only been able to see a couple of feet in front of them, but for Evelyn it was more than enough to see normally. Well, time to see where this leads. Slowly lowering herself down the hatch, she grabbed her claws around the first rung of the ladder and carefully began making her way down. Certainly, this was far from easy for her as an owl, but she took it slowly and carefully, and whenever she lost balance and nearly fell, she would lower the gravity around herself and send out a gust of wind to right herself. Time quickly went by, and soon after having traveled around 1,000 feet underground, she finally hit the bottom of ladder. When she touched down, she felt a slight wetness on the stone and realized that it was some of the alcohol that had seeped through the ground. Looking around, all she saw was a rocky tunnel leading further down into the depths of the world. Of course, it was obviously man-made since at periodic positions small stone that glowed faintly were placed into the walls. Feeling anticipation and fear welling up inside her, Evelyn was not certain if she wanted to continue. But now that she had gone this deep, the Ethersphere was reacting again and pointing her along the path. Steeling herself, she had already made up her mind to see this through, and hoped that whatever was at the end might be of use to her. At least now I can fly again, she thought as she spread her wings and began flying down the tunnel. It slowly became steeper and steeper to around the limits of what a person could walk down, though this did not matter to Evelyn who could fly. Eventually she found that the path was going in a winding pattern as it descended very far into the ground. What the hell is this place? It just goes down, and down, and down. There is simply no way that this could be practical. Thinking that this tunnel that went deep underground was completely absurd, Evelyn could not fathom that any sort of civilization used it as means to travel to the surface from deep underground or vice versa. At this point all she could figure was that someone had left something they did not want anyone else to find down here. Continuing on, after what felt like an eternity, she finally made it to the end of the path and a door stood in front of her. From what she could see there was some scrawling on the door she could not read, but beyond it was definitely where the Ethersphere was pointing. Great, now what? I have no idea what this says, and for all I know this door could be trapped. Yet as she approached the door tentatively, it just opened up and revealed the room beyond it. Having already come this far, she figured that she would see what was here, and walked into the room. As she did, a pedestal in the middle of the room lit up, and on it was some type of amulet. But before she could move over to it, the pedestal began growing brighter and a projection showed above it. A man she did not recognize then began saying something in a language she did not understand. Luckily it only lasted for around 2 minutes before it ended. Shrugging her shoulders, she simply went up to the amulet and grabbed it. She figured that it was the item she had come down here for, and it was worth the risk, take it even when she had no idea what had just been said. Thankfully nothing bad happened when she grabbed it and the room stayed exactly the same as it had been. However, she quickly realized that this pendant was not what had led her down here. The Ethersphere was continuing to point forward even as she grabbed it, pulling her in the direction of the wall on the other side of the room. Finding this strange, she flew over to this wall and noticed that it had more writing on it, along with all of the other walls in this room. But unlike the rest of the writing she had seen in here, there were 3 words written larger than all of the others that she could read. Seeing this her eyes went wide, as in front of her, written on the wall and with a space below it, were the words, "What is your name? What the hell is going on in here? Why are there words from my old world written in between all of these others?" Being put in front of this unbelievable situation, Evelyn could not understand what this place was. Certainly, it had not been super easy to find, but once she had found it there were no obstacles to stop her from reaching this point. It had almost been too easy, and now there were words from Earth scrawled onto a wall thousands of feet below ground on another world. Still, whatever the Ethersphere had been leading her to was beyond this wall, and she decided to see what might happen if she wrote her name. Maybe someone else from Earth built this place to help out anyone else from their home planet that found it. And writing your name is a sort of identifier. Evelyn thought, trying to come up with a rational solution to what this was. Placing one of her claws on the space under the question, she found that it began glowing. Moving her claw, the glow followed along with it and stuck around for about a minute before disappearing. After discovering this, she wrote her name in the space, hoping that maybe something might happen. As she did, her name disappeared from the rock, before repapering again much brighter, and the entire room began to rumble. At first, she thought she might have triggered some type of trap, but instead the wall in front of her began to part and lead into a much larger room than the one she was currently in. Heading inside, she saw that this place was full of shelves and cabinets with all manner of items stored on and within them. Yet before she could explore this room, from the center of it on a raised platform, the image of the man she had seen in the previous room appeared again. But this time he did not speak some alien language she did not understand, but instead a language she knew well from her first life. "It appears that you found this place as I foresaw you would. I have left everything here for you, Evie." Chapter 26, A Brother's Gift. Chapter 27 A Brother's Gift. 2. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. "It appears that you found this place as I foresaw you would. I have left everything here for you, Evie." Eyes going wide and her mind going blank, for a moment Evelyn thought she had misheard what this projection had just said. Yet just a moment later it said, "Oh, and just in case it was not obvious, it is me, Mason, your brother." Hearing this, Evelyn's mind that was frozen began racing, and her heart started beating faster. Her brother, who she had watched die, had also ended up in this strange world. He looked completely different, having golden hair opposed to his former brown hair, a thick beard that matched, and this man was far older than Mason ever had been, looking to be around 30. Yet the way he spoke, how he called her by her nickname, it was exactly like how he had been. Anyway, her appearance was even more far removed than his, since he looked to have been reincarnated as a human, while she was an owl. "I am sure that you have a number of questions, and I will be sure to answer as many as I can in the time I have. Unfortunately, I cannot be here to meet you in person and have left this recording of myself to explain what I can. First, as I am sure you have come to realize, this world is very different from our first world. Here there is magic that can create phenomenon that would be impossible on Earth. That is how I knew to leave this place here for you. I will not bore you with all of the details right now, as the amount of time I have to record this is limited, but I developed a type of magic that allows me to peer into fate. Of course, it is not all powerful, but it did lead me to finding that you would be here. Though it did also show me that if I did not intervene, your fate was to die a violent death." Gulping, Evelyn did not fully grasp what her brother was saying, but she definitely did not like the prospect of being killed again. "That is why I tirelessly searched for a way to make sure that this would not happen to you, but as it so often is, fate was cruel. In order to prevent your fate from leading only to death, I had to steal a certain item from my family in this world and gain their ire for doing so." The projection then paused for a moment and directed Evelyn's attention to the side of it where the floor began to open up. Then coming out from the ground in a clear box very similar to the one that had once held the Ethersphere, was a crimson flame. It was currently not moving and was completely still. But looking at this flame, Evelyn almost got lost in its beauty. Yet that was not all, as she quickly realized that this flame was what the Ethersphere had been directing her towards. Even in its current suspended state she could feel that it held immense power. "This here was my family's greatest treasure. I do not truly know much about it, other than that it is one of the 16 heavenly flames said to have fallen to this world from a higher realm thousands of years ago. But what I do know is that with this magical flame in your possession your fate changes drastically. It is no longer set in stone that you will die and has become muddled. Even I am not sure what your fate will truly have in store for you now." Pausing once again, Evelyn watched the projection begin to shudder and she saw what looked like tears running down its face. "I truly am sorry, Evie. I wish I could have been here for you myself, but it was just not possible. I do not know how we came to end up in this world after that monster killed us, but I was reborn here centuries before you. By the time you see this recording I will no longer be of this world." Evelyn's heart dropped as soon as she heard that her brother, who she had just found out was reincarnated as well, was already gone. It was just another cruel circumstance to add on to all of the loss she had incurred over both of her lives. However, while I may not be here to personally help you out, I have left everything I could to assist you in your new life. This world has any number of magically imbued items and I have procured as much as I could for you here. Truthfully, it is not a great amount, but it should hopefully give you a jump start on your advancement in this world. Though as for what may be the most valuable items I have left you other than the heavenly flame, it would have to be as these. After the projection of Mason said this, one of the shelves in the room lit up and illuminated a number of books. I have left what knowledge of this world to you as I can here in these books. And since I am not sure how long you have been here or at what level of literacy you have achieved, I have written you a guide on how to learn the langue of this continent. Also, one of these books is my own diary in which I have explained more about my new life for you. Oh, and you do not need to worry about the other room you first arrived in. I put that there as a decoy on the off chance someone found this place before you. Explaining all of the details would take too long, but I did write it down in my diary if you are interested. Now it looks like the time I have left to record on this device is coming to an end, so I have a couple more pieces of advice for you. Do not stay in this place for more than 3 months. If you stick around here for longer than that, something disastrous is going to happen, though I do not know what exactly it might be. Looks like my time is coming to an end here. I have done all I can for you now and hope that it was enough. Please do your best to survive Evie, and this time you will hopefully have a happy life. Chapter 28 Resolve. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As the projection of her brother disappeared, Evelyn instinctively reached out for him, trying to grasp onto this last little fragment of her brother. Unfortunately, her brother had long since left this place, and no longer even existed on the new world Evelyn found herself on. Tears had already begun streaming down her face practically from the start of the recording, but now that it was over, the full weight of what had happened hit her like a truck. She fell right over onto the ground screaming and slamming her wings and claws against the ground. It was all just so much for her to take along with everything else she had gone through. She had found her brother again, the person she was closest to in her previous world and the one who easily held the highest place in her heart. Yet in just moments he was ripped away from her again by the harshness of fate. They never even had a chance to meet each other, because while they had only died minutes apart, Mason had ended up in this world centuries before Evelyn had. The prospect of seeing her brother again had not even occurred to her, yet now that she knew they ultimately ended up in the same world, losing him again brought back all of the original pain she had felt when she watched him die. Damn it all. Why does fate, destiny, or whatever have to always be so cruel? Is all that awaits me more suffering? If that is all I have to look forward to, why do I even keep living? Falling into the depths of despair, Evelyn began contemplating ending it all again, wanting to somehow cease all of the pain she was feeling. However, she quickly shook off this feeling for multiple reasons. Her brother had left so much for her, and likely sacrificed his own fate to give her a chance. If she were to throw away her life here, it would mean everything he gave up and all he had done to make sure she could survive here was meaningless. It would be like her spitting in the face of his resolve and his love for his little sister that he worked hard to protect in 2 lives. Another reason that convinced her not to end her own life, was because of not knowing what might happen next. For all she knew, when she died again, she might be reborn as something else. Maybe ending up as a caterpillar, or possibly even a microscopic organism. The last thing she wanted was to start again in an even more harsh environment, or to end up in another loving home that all comes crashing down around her. She had already fought very hard in this life and lost so much. Now was the time where she could finally move forward and try and live a good life as her brother had wanted her to. I will survive and make the best of this life, and then I will find Mason again. We may not have been able to reunite here, but there is magic on this world. If he was able to look into the future to find me here, surely, I can find a way to get to wherever he is now. We both already died once and ended up on another world, so he has to be somewhere out there, and I will find him. Finding her resolve, Evelyn steeled her heart and etched her reasons to live in it. She would live for her brother who had done what he could to protect her in both their first and second lives. And she would figure out the magic of this world and search for a way to reunite with him wherever he might be now. Once she was finished crying and had gotten herself together, with a determined look in her eyes she stared towards the crimson flame suspended in a clear case. This was the item that her brother said had the power to change her fate, and she knew it was something incredibly powerful. Moving towards it she looked at the flame intently for a few moments, before clicking the switch on the case that opened it. As soon as she did, the case opened up and the flame that had been suspended began to flicker around, and an intense heat permeated the entire room. It was nearly unbearable, and Evelyn had to create gusts of wind around herself to keep from burning. Now that the flame was freed from its prison, she could not help but think that it almost seemed alive as it pulsed at regular intervals. It definitely feels powerful, though I am not sure what to do with it. I suppose that I should seal it away again and see if I can find any more details about it in the books Mason left me. Moving to close the case again, Evelyn found that the flame moved on its own to prevent being sealed away, and actually flew at her. Then as it got closer, one of the rings around Ethersphere which had been pointing towards this flame began spinning. Suddenly the heavenly flame, as Mason had called it, began getting sucked into Evelyn's body. Immediately her body started to get incredibly hot, and it felt like her blood was boiling as this flame entered inside her. Falling to the ground she began rolling around in extreme pain that was nearly as bad as when the Ethersphere had been implanted into her. She had no idea why the flame had entered her body, but the pain was immense, and it took everything she had to keep a hold of her sanity. In fact, if not for all of the pain she had already experienced, this probably would have been enough to break her. But she stayed strong, and within just a couple of minutes the pain subsided as the flames coalesced in her chest around the Ethersphere. Chapter 29 Books. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Once the crimson heavenly flame had finished being absorbed, Evelyn let out a long breath of relief as the pain subsided. Though while it no longer hurt, she could now feel a perpetual warmth in her chest where the flame had taken root around the Ethersphere. Ugh, a little warning would have been nice. I had no idea that it was going to force that flame into me. And why do these stupid magic items always have to hurt when they integrate themselves into me? A bit angry from the extreme pain she had just experienced, Evelyn was fed up with everything hurting her. Still there was no doubt she felt a sense of strength in her body now that the flame had become a part of the Ethersphere. Sending her senses towards the heavenly flame she felt it pulsing within her. Focusing on it she sent the magical energy in her body towards it, and the flame began to devour the energy and grow larger. Luckily this did not cause her any distress. And focusing on the flames as she did with the Ethersphere, she brought it outside of her body. Boom! As the flames left her body, they went wild and hit the floor in front of her, causing an explosion. Being blown back. Evelyn felt her head spinning from the concussive force of the explosion. But the heat had seemed to have no effect on her now the heavenly flame was a part of her. Of course, what she did not know was that most entities that tried to merge with this flame ended up nothing but ash, and it was only thanks to the Ethersphere's intervention that she had gained control over it. Nevertheless, now that it was hers, her body was practically immune to heat and fire for the most part. Okay, not doing that again in an enclosed space. Evelyn thought as she got up off the ground. Her head was still ringing from the explosion, and as she looked over, she saw that a portion of the floor had been blown away and melted. Once the pain in her head subsided, she turned her attention to the shelf full of books her brother had left. Truly what she needed right now was information, which was something she was sorely lacking in this new world. Normally if she had been born to human parents, she probably could have picked the long up naturally, but her owl family communicated in hoots, squawks, and gestures instead of words. Luckily her brother had left her what she needed to learn the long of this world, and she was going to take advantage of it. Time to get started. Flying over to the bookshelves, Evelyn began pulling them out, and looked for any that had been written in the long she knew from her old world. She flipped through dozens of books in search of anything she could read, but most of them were written in the strange long she did not understand. Sadly, there were only 2 books that had any of the long she recognized in them. One being the guide Mason had handwritten for her, and the other being his diary. Though as she flipped through the diary, she found that it was a mixed with this world's long, and that the further into it she went the more it transitioned into the long she did not understand. I am in for a real slog here trying to learn this new long. But I suppose I do not have anything better to do, so I might as well get started. Opening up the book, Evelyn found on the first page that Mason had left her a little note saying that he believed in her, and that she could learn this long if she put her mind to it. Seeing this and recognizing his handwriting, tears started welling up in Evelyn's eyes again, but she forced them back down and continued on. To start, the first section had a list of the symbols used in the writing of this world and what Mason considered to be the closest counterparts to the letters Evelyn knew. Unfortunately, it was definitely not a 1.2.1 translation as there were 31 symbols used in this world for writing. At the very least when she flipped the page, she found the numbers to be relatively easily with just 10 symbols representing 0 to 9. For the whole rest of the day, she practiced the alphabet. Trying to memorize the symbols and what they equated to, as well as sounding them out in her head according to the phonetics that Mason had written down next to them. Nevertheless, even with her best efforts, progress was slow, and she soon felt her mind begin to muddle as she became tired. Feeling that she was not going to be able to make any more progress today, she lifted her head up from the book and looked around. Scanning the room she found quite the pleasant surprise, in that Mason had left a small living area for her in one of the corners of this room. There she saw a bed and chair along with a small kitchenette. I guess if I had to spend the time to head back up and out of this place every day just to get food and find a place to sleep, I would spend the majority of my time just moving around. Flying on over, Evelyn was surprised how good the condition of everything was, and that there was not a speck of dust anywhere. She figured it was probably due to some magic imbued in the items to prevent them from degrading. Unfortunately, it appeared that none of the food items had survived this long other than what looked to be honey. I will find something else to eat tomorrow. For now, I need some sleep. Moving over to the bed, Evelyn perched herself on top of it and leaned back, before closing her eyes and drifting off to sleep. Chapter 30 Mason's Diary. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Evelyn's days quickly passed by as she learned the long of this world, so that she could read the books Mason had left for her. It had already been 80 days since she had come to find the gift her brother had left to her, and she had made a great deal of progress. She had recently achieved a rudimentary understanding of this world's long, and could now read and understand about 90% of what was written in the books that had been left for her. Of course, she could not read very fast and quite often had to reference the long guidebook, but at least now she had the minimum understanding needed to get through the books and obtain the knowledge held within them. Still, the question was which one to start with first. She had skimmed through the first couple of pages of each of the 17 books that she had here, in part as practice and in order to understand what was held within each book. I suppose I really should start with this one. Picking up her brother's diary, Evelyn felt a sense of trepidation about reading it. All she had left of her brother was in this book, and once she read it, she would know exactly what happened to him. A part of her really wanted to leave this a mystery in hopes that she could believe that maybe her brother had a great life that was devoid of any hardship. Nevertheless, she knew she needed to read what was within this book and opened it up to the first page. The start of the diary was pretty much entirely in the long they knew back from Earth. It detailed how Mason had been born into a highly prestigious family in a place called Ultak Empire. Apparently, they were one of 5 major clans in this empire and inferior only to the imperial family. Reading this, Evelyn felt a bit envious, since it seemed that Mason got just about as good a start as he could have. He was born to a rich and powerful family and never had to worry about much of anything. Not to mention he apparently had the best teachers for learning magic and was considered a prodigy. However, while the first 30 or so pages just detailed his early life, when he reached 20.7 and developed the magic to peer into fate, his goals shifted as he tried to find Evelyn. It seemed that he thought she might be in this world as well and wanted to find her if he could. Unfortunately, all he found was that she did not exist in this world yet and was destined to die a violent death. After that his writing became a bit more fanatical, talking about he was going to do something save her. The entries at this point became a lot more sparse and shorter as he only updated it about once every year, giving progress updates. Yet this was when Evelyn realized something weird. She was about 2/3 of the way through the diary now, and going by the dates her brother should have been somewhere around 70 years old. But the man she saw in the recording looked around 30 and the diary was not even near the end yet, which is probably when he would have made this place. He has not really addressed the magic in this world in detail, but is it possible that there is a way for people to prolong their lives? Or do humans just live longer in this world? Continuing on, she finally got to the point where he figured out that if she obtained the heavenly flame that was his family's greatest treasure, her fate was no longer guaranteed to end in death. Unfortunately, other than that, he was not certain what would happen since her fate became very obscured, but at least it meant she had a chance. The next entry after this one was by far the longest gap, being about 5 years, and it detailed how he was successful in stealing the flame from his family. He had prepared years for it and finally he got his hands on the heavenly flame and made a run for it. Naturally his family was enraged and sent all manner of experts after him, but he barely managed to avoid or beat them back by looking into his own fate. Quickly Evelyn shot through the next few pages that told of how Mason avoided his family while collecting more supplies to leave for her. Then finally she came to the last few pages where he arrived at this abandoned ruin far from his home. He had been continuously divining his own and Evelyn's fate, and his magic had pointed him here, to practically the edge of the world. This was the place he had found where she was eventually going to end up and find the resources he had left for her. The next few entries went over how he used earth magic to dig this place out, and what kind of things he thought might be good to leave for Evelyn. Sadly, he did not have all the time in the world to stick around here, or eventually he would be found out. Finally, Evelyn made it to the last entry, which was far different from the rest, which were just accounts of Mason's life or what actions he had been taking. This entry, unlike the others, was a direct letter to Evelyn. "Hey there Evie, I guess you finally made it to the end of my diary. When I just finished reading through it, I realized that I did not leave you much useful information. Though really when I first wrote it, I was not planning on leaving it to you, so I suppose that is to be expected. Anyway, back to what I really wanted to say. This world is a dangerous place full of beasts and monsters you probably cannot imagine, and magic that can be wielded in many forms. I just wanted to tell you to be careful and to never get full of yourself even if you get strong. There is always someone more powerful than you in this world, and for every magic there is a counter, so never be conceited. I have taken my fair share of losses by thinking myself above others and only gotten out alive by the skin of my teeth. Now on the next page I left a recommendation for what order you should read the other books in. Of course, if you already know something feel free to skip over it. I just left everything I could for you here. Oh, and in the cabinet to the far right of the room I left a catalog of all of the items I left you, along with descriptions. This is the last thing I am going to be able to leave to you, but good luck. I pray for you success and happiness this time. Sincerely, your older brother Mason. P.S. I nearly forgot to mention what that first room was about. As I said in the recording, that is a decoy in case someone else finds this place first. That storage amulet just contains a few kinds of rare items in it, and in the message, I ask whoever found it to get revenge against my family for me in return for the amulet and its contents. You do not need to worry about this, as I do not really hold any sort of grudge against my family. Even though it is likely that one of their agents will kill me in the future. Okay, now this really is the last thing I will write, or I will be at this forever. Take care Evelyn, I love you.